H. At 18, my dad kicked me out for disrespect. I asked why my sister got a car, and I did not. 2 years later, she totaled the car. He asked me for help with the payments. I laughed. That is the short version, the one that fits into a single breath at a party. Etch! But the reality was a slow, suffocating burn that started long before the car was ever purchased. My name is Brett H. And for the first 18 years of my life, H. I was less of a son and more of a background character in the meticulously curated reality show of my parents, Bill and Karen. The star of that show was undoubtedly my younger sister, Emma. To understand why I laughed when my father called me begging for money, H, you have to understand the dinner table where it all ended. It was a Tuesday in mid-October. H, the air in the dining room was thick with the smell of pot roast and the underlying tension of unsaid things. My parents were glowing, their faces flushed with a pride that had nothing to do with me. Earlier that afternoon, they had surprised Emma with a vehicle. It was not just a vehicle. It was a brand new Mazda CX-5, pearl white, H, with leather seats that still smelled like the factory floor, and a sunroof that opened to the sky. It had 0 miles on the odometer. It had a backup camera, heated seats, and a sound system that cost more than my entire wardrobe. Aish. I stood in the driveway and watched them hand her the keys. I watched Emma scream and jump, clutching the key fob like it was a holy relic. H. I watched my father wipe a tear from his eye and tell her she deserved it, because she had worked so hard. Emma had a 2.9 grade point average. She had failed geometry twice. H. Her definition of hard work was remembering to put her dishes in the dishwasher. I looked at the driveway where my car was parked. H. It was a beat-up 2003 Honda Civic with 180,000 miles on the engine. The H, the clear coat, was peeling off the hood like sunburned skin. The check engine light had been on since the Bush administration. H. The air conditioning blew hot air, and the radio was stuck on a country station I could not change because the knob had snapped off. H. I paid for the gas. I paid for the insurance. I paid for the oil changes. Inside the house, the celebration continued over dinner. H. Emma was vibrating with excitement, talking a mile a minute about road trips she was planning with her friends. H. She was discussing custom floor mats and asking if she could get a personalized license plate that said something cute. My mother was nodding along, cutting her roast beef with precise, happy strokes, asking if Emma wanted to drive to the mall later to show it off. I sat there, pushing peas around my plate, doing the math in my head. H. I had been working 20 hours a week at the grocery store while taking advanced placement classes. H. I had managed to save about $3,000. I was looking at used Toyotas in the $4,000 range. H. Hoping my parents might match me, or at least sign a loan so I did not have to drive a death trap that stalled at red lights. Hey, Dad, I said, waiting for a break in Emma's monologue about seat covers. Since Emma got a new car, does that mean I can have the Civic? H. Or are you planning to help me buy something? The silence that followed was instant and absolute. H. It was as if I had slammed a fist onto the table, but I had not raised my voice. I had just asked a question. Emma stopped mid-sentence. My mother's fork froze halfway to her mouth. My father slowly lowered his knife, turning his head to look at me with an expression of profound irritation, as if the toaster had just started talking. "What?" he asked. His voice low. "I am just asking if you are planning to help me get a car too," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Emma got a brand new one, so I figured maybe you would help me get something used or chip in on what I have saved." My father's face went a shade of red that I knew well. "That is completely different," he said. "How?" I asked. "Emma needed a reliable car for school and activities," he said. "You already have access to the Civic." "The Civic barely runs," I countered. "And it is the family car, not mine. You take it whenever yours is in the shop." "I am just asking if you are planning to help me buy a car like you helped Emma." My mother chimed in then, her voice dripping with that particular brand of guilt she wielded like a weapon. "You should be grateful you have access to any vehicle at all, Brett. Do you know how many kids do not even have that?" "I am not ungrateful," I said. "I am just asking a question." "You are being disrespectful," my father snapped, throwing his napkin onto his plate. "We worked hard to give Emma that car. She has been looking forward to it for 2 years. And you are sitting here complaining and making demands like you are entitled to something. You are trying to ruin her moment by making it about yourself." I looked across the table. Emma had slumped in her chair, her lower lip trembling. She looked like she was about to cry, a tactic she had perfected by the age of 5. "Why are you being like this, Brett?" she whined. "Can I not just have this one thing without you making it weird? One thing." This was the first time she had gotten something I had not. That was the joke of the century. But I did not laugh then. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. It was the realization that I was not crazy. I was not imagining the disparity. It was right there, sitting in the driveway in pearl white paint. I stood up. "Forget it," I said. "Congratulations on the car, Emma." I went to my room and closed the door, but the walls were thin. I could hear them downstairs. I heard my father talking about my attitude. I heard my mother agreeing that I needed to learn to be happy for other people. I heard them rewriting history in real time, turning my simple question into an act of aggression. That night was the beginning of the end. Over the next few weeks, the house became a minefield. My father barely spoke to me except to criticize. My mother offered passive, aggressive comments about gratitude every time I walked through the kitchen. I started picking up extra shifts at the grocery store just to avoid being home. I would come back late. Smell like produce and exhaustion, and go straight to my room. 2 weeks later, I came home from a double shift around 10 at night. My feet were throbbing. My head was pounding. I walked into the living room and found my father sitting in the dark, his arms crossed, waiting for me. "We need to talk," he said. I dropped my backpack by the door. "About what?" "Your attitude," he said. "Your disrespect. The way you treat your mother and sister." I was too tired to fight. "Dad, I haven't said anything about the car since that dinner." I have barely been home." "Exactly," he said, standing up. "You are avoiding your family because you cannot be happy for your sister. You are 18 now, Brett. You are an adult. And adults do not live here for free while making everyone else miserable. H. The room tilted slightly. What does that mean? It means if you cannot respect this family and appreciate what you have, maybe you should find somewhere else to live, he said. You are kicking me out. I am giving you a choice, he said, stepping closer. H. Looming over me. Adjust your attitude and contribute positively to this household, or find your own place. I looked at him. I looked at the man who was supposed to be my father. Aish. The man who had just bought a $30,000 car for a daughter who failed geometry, but wanted to throw me onto the street because I asked for fairness. He thought I would fold. He thought I would apologize, beg for forgiveness, and get back in line as the invisible son. Fine, I said. His eyes widened. What? I will be gone by the end of the week, I said. I turned around, walked up the stairs, and started packing. I did not know where I was going. I had had $3,000, a dying car, and a terrifying amount of uncertainty. But as I pulled my clothes off the hangers, I felt something else underneath the fear. I felt free. The week following the ultimatum was a study in silence. It was not the peaceful silence of a library, but the heavy, pressurized silence of a submarine diving too deep. My parents went about their routines as if I were already a ghost. My father watched television in the living room, turning up the volume whenever I walked past. My mother cooked dinner for 3, leaving my usual spot at the table empty, a passive-aggressive void where a son used to be. Emma simply vanished. Spending her evenings at friends' houses, likely driving her new Mazda to places I could not afford to go. I spent those 3 days packing my entire existence into cardboard boxes. I scavenged from the back of the grocery store. It is humbling to realize how little space 18 years of life actually takes up. Clothes, a laptop, a stack of textbooks. The a few basketball trophies that suddenly looked cheap and meaningless. Everything I owned fit into the trunk and back seat of the dying Civic. It was a game of Tetris played with memories, and I was losing. On the 4th morning, I loaded the last box. My father was standing in the garage, leaning against his workbench, watching me. He did not offer to help. He did not ask where I was going. He just watched with a look of smug certainty. The look of a man watching a toddler try to run away from home. He was waiting for me to break. He was waiting for the apology, the surrender, the admission that I was nothing without him. I walked past him, got into the driver's seat, and turned the key. The Civic sputtered, coughed, and finally roared to life with a sound like a lawn mower choking on a rock. I put it in reverse. I did not wave. I did not look back at the house that had been my only home. I just backed out, shifted into drive, and rolled down the street. In the rearview mirror, I saw my mother standing at the living room window. She looked sad, but not sad enough to come outside. Not sad enough to stop me. I moved into an apartment complex on the south side of town that my friend Austin had found. When I say apartment, I am being generous. It was the 3rd floor of a converted house that smelled permanently of stale beer and damp carpet. Austin lived there with two other guys, Leo and Zach, who worked odd jobs and communicated mostly in grunts. The H. There was a mysterious brown stain on the ceiling of the living room that seemed to grow larger every time it rained. H. And the bathroom was a biological hazard zone shared by 4 grown men. The H. But when I handed Austin my share of the rent, $400 plus a split of the utilities, and threw my mattress onto the floor of the smallest bedroom. The H. I felt a strange rush of adrenaline. The walls were thin, the carpet was gross, and the radiator clanked like a dying robot. But it was mine. I had paid for it. No one could kick me out of it for asking a question. I settled into a rhythm of survival. I kept my job at the grocery store and picked up a second gig washing dishes at a 24-hour diner 3 nights a week. H. I was pulling in about $1,800 a month before taxes. My bank account, H, which had started at $3,000, began to bleed. Rent, security deposit, food, gas, insurance. H. The numbers in my head were a constant, ticking countdown. Then, the inevitable happened. The timeline of poverty does not care about your plans. 2 months after I moved out, I was driving to the diner for a night shift. The H. I was on the highway, doing 60, when the Civic gave a violent shudder. The engine revved high, screaming like a wounded animal. The H. But the car did not accelerate. I pressed the gas pedal to the floor. Nothing. The transmission had finally given up the ghost. H. I managed to coast onto the shoulder just as the engine seized completely, smoke billowing out from under the hood in a thick gray cloud. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, watching cars zoom past me. I did not cry. I did not scream. I just felt a heavy, dull exhaustion settle into my bones. The tow truck driver charged me $150 to drag the carcass to a local shop. The mechanic, a guy named Sal with Grace permanently etched into his fingerprints, wiped his hands on a rag and gave me the verdict. Transmission is shot, he said. Head gasket is blown too. To fix this, you are looking at $2,000 minimum, maybe $2,500. I looked at the car. It was worth maybe $500 on a good day. I cannot afford that, I said. Sal nodded. He had seen this movie before. I will give you $300 for it as scrap metal, he said. Save you the tow fee to the junkyard. I took the $300. I cleared out my glove compartment, took my license plates, and walked away. I left my freedom in a scrap heap behind a garage and walked 2 miles to the nearest bus stop. That was the start of the real grind. Losing the car added 2 hours to my daily commute. I had to take 2 transfers to get to the grocery store, then another bus to get to the diner. I learned the schedule by heart. I learned which drivers would wait for you, if you were running specifically for the door, and which ones would pull away while looking you dead in the eye. Winter arrived early that year. Standing at a bus stop at 11:30 at night in February is a specific kind of hell. The wind cuts through your coat like it is not even there. Your toes go numb inside your work boots. I remember standing there one night, shivering so hard my teeth chattered, watching a white SUV drive past. It looked warm inside. Safe. I thought about Emma in her heated leather seats. I thought about my father sitting in his recliner. The H, probably telling my mother that I would be back any day now, crawling home once the reality of the world hit me. I tightened my scarf and stepped onto the bus. I would freeze before I went back. I would ride this bus until the wheels fell off before I asked them for a single cent. They expected me to fail. They were banking on it. And that expectation became the fuel that kept me warm when the heater in my apartment broke. The H. I was not just living for myself anymore. I was living out of spite. 18 months is a long time to live on 4 hours of sleep. H. It changes the way you see the world. Colors get a little less vibrant. Noises get a little sharper. H. And your patience for anything that does not directly contribute to your survival evaporates completely. For a year and a half, my life was a gray loop of stocking shelves, riding buses, and solving quadratic equations with eyes that burned from exhaustion. I had enrolled in community college 6 months after the Civic died. I could only afford 2 classes at a time. The H, paying out of pocket because I refused to take out loans without a safety net. I took Introduction to Business and College Algebra. My days were a masterclass in logistics. H. I was up at 5:30 in the morning to catch the first bus to the grocery store for the opening shift. I spent 8 hours facing cans of soup and wrestling pallets of dog food. At 3 o'clock, I clocked out. H. Ate a peanut butter sandwich on the ride to campus and sat in lectures until 9. Then, it was back to the apartment to study until my brain shut down around 1 in the morning. The voice of my father was a constant companion during those long nights. It was not a comforting presence. It was a phantom narrator, H, waiting for me to slip up. Every time I got a C on a quiz or dropped a jar of pickles at work, I could hear him. C, shh, the voice would say. You are not cut out for the real world. You need us. But I did not need them. That was the fuel that kept me going when the caffeine stopped working. I was driven by a cold H, hard need to prove that I could exist without their permission. Around the 1-year mark, the A, my manager at the grocery store, pulled me into the small, windowless office at the back of the store. He was a good guy named Marcus H, who had seen me come in early and stay late without complaint. Brett, he said, leaning back in his chair. H, the assistant supervisor spot on the floor is opening up. It is yours if you want it. I did the math instantly. The promotion came with a raise to $14 an hour. It came with consistent full-time hours, and, more importantly, it came with health insurance. I will take it, I said. That $14 an hour felt like winning the lottery. H. It meant I could quit the dishwashing job at the diner. It meant I could sleep for 6 hours a night instead of 4. H. It meant I could afford to buy fresh vegetables instead of just frozen burritos. H. It was the first time since leaving home that I felt like I was not just treading water, but actually swimming. That promotion also introduced me to Jenna. She was in my business class. A girl with sharp eyes and a messy bun who always sat in the front row. We started talking one night after class, when we both missed the bus and had to wait 40 minutes in the rain for the next one. We ended up at a 24-hour coffee shop, nursing the cheapest drip coffee on the menu. You look like you are about to pass out, H, she had said, looking at the dark circles under my eyes. "I am fine," I said, the automatic response I gave everyone. She did not buy it. Ish. She asked about my schedule, and for some reason, I told her. I told her about the 2 jobs, the bus, the apartment with the stain on the ceiling. I did not tell her about my parents. Aish. That wound was still too fresh to expose to a stranger. Jenna listened, nodding. She was working full time at a bank while getting her degree. She was the one who introduced me to the concept of financial defense. You need a Roth IRA, she told me a few weeks later. I laughed. Jenna, I have $50 left over at the end of the month. I am not exactly Wall Street material. That is exactly why you need one, she insisted. Compound interest is the only friend you have when you are broke. If you put that $50 away now, it grows. If you spend it on pizza, it is gone. She was right. I started putting $5 a month into a retirement account. It was a pathetic amount. Really. But watching that number sit there, untouchable, gave me a sense of control I had never felt before. It was a fortress I was building, brick by tiny brick. Life was stabilizing. I was tired, yes, but I was standing on my own 2 feet. And then, in a moment of weakness, I checked. It had been 18 months since I spoke to my parents or Emma. 18 months of absolute radio silence. No birthday texts, no Christmas cards, nothing. I convinced myself that they were struggling with the guilt, that they missed me but were too proud to reach out. I unblocked Emma's profile on social media for 10 seconds just to see. The first photo that popped up was from a week ago. It was a family vacation to the beach. My parents were there, tanned and smiling, holding tropical drinks. Emma was in the middle. Beaming, wearing sunglasses that probably cost more than my rent. They looked happy. They looked complete. There was no hole in the family portrait where I used to be. The waters had closed over my head, and they were sailing on without even looking back. I stared at that photo for a long time. The anger I had been carrying, the hot, fiery rage that fueled my late nights, suddenly cooled into something else. It turned into ice. They had not just kicked me out, they had erased me. I was not a son to them. I was an appliance that had stopped working, so they threw it out and moved on. I re-blocked the profile. I put my phone down on the scratched laminate table of the break room and stared at the wall. I realized then that I was truly alone. And strangely, that realization did not break me. It hardened me. If I was a ghost to them, then I would be the most successful ghost they ever haunted. I went back to work. I stocked shelves with a mechanical precision, my mind empty of everything except the task at hand. I was done waiting for an apology. I was done waiting for them to realize their mistake. I was working the cereal aisle on a Tuesday afternoon, organizing boxes of Cheerios, when my phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a text from Austin about the rent or a message from Jenna about our next study session. It was an unknown number. Normally, I would let it go to voicemail, but something, maybe instinct, maybe the lingering shadow of that photo, made me answer. Hello? Hello? Brett. It is Dad. My hand froze on the box of cereal. The voice was the same, but the tone was different. It It lacked the imperious boom of the man who had kicked me out. It sounded smaller. "What do you want?" I asked. My voice was steady, stripped of any emotion. "I need to talk to you," he said. "It is about family." I almost laughed. The audacity of that word coming from his mouth was breathtaking. But before I could hang up, he dropped the hook. Emma was in an accident. The world stopped for a second. Despite everything, despite the silence and the erasure, the instinct to protect was still there, buried deep under the scar tissue. "Is she okay?" I asked. "She is fine," he said quickly. She is physically fine. But the car is totaled. The car. Of course, it always came back to the car. "Okay," I said, the adrenaline fading. Replaced by a cold suspicion. "The car is totaled. Why are you calling me?" Silence stretched on the line, heavy and awkward. Then, he said the words that would change everything, the words that would turn the tragedy of my departure into a dark comedy. "We need your help with the payments." The heavy steel door clicked shut behind Jonas, cutting off the wail of the sirens. Finally, silence. Or what passed for silence in the belly of the beast. The server room hummed with a low vibrating frequency that he could feel in the fillings of his teeth. He took a breath, holding it for 4 seconds before exhaling slowly to steady his hands. He was in. The map from the contact had been perfect. Almost too perfect. He walked down the long aisle of blinking blue lights. The air was frigid, kept at a constant 60 degrees to protect the machinery. Goosebumps rose on his arms under his thin tactical vest. But the cold kept him sharp. The smell of ozone and sterilized plastic filled his nose. He checked his watch. 7 minutes. That was all the time he had before the automated security sweep cycled back to this sector. 7 minutes to find the truth and burn it to the ground. Jonas reached the main terminal at the end of the row. It was an island of analog chaos in a sea of digital order. Papers were scattered across the desk. And a half-drunk cup of coffee sat precariously close to a keyboard. It looked like someone had just left moments ago. That was not part of the plan. The contact had promised the facility would be empty on a Sunday night. He pushed the doubt down. Focus on the mission. He pulled the decryption drive from his pocket. It felt heavy. The heavier than a piece of plastic had any right to be. It contained the worm that would eat the company from the inside out. He located the port on the side of the console and slid the drive in. The screen flickered. A command prompt appeared. The cursor blinking like a heartbeat. Initiating handshake, he whispered to himself. The text scrolled rapidly. Green characters cascading down a black background. It was mesmerizing. 20%. 40%. He tapped his fingers against his thigh, the rhythm matching the adrenaline pumping through his veins. He thought about Sarah. If this worked, her medical debts would be wiped clean. The blackmail would end. They could disappear to that small town on the coast they used to talk about. Then, the scrolling stopped. A dialog box popped up in the center of the screen. User identification required. Jonas froze. This was not in the briefing. The drive was supposed to bypass authentication entirely. He typed in the backdoor code he had memorized. 39 Alpha Zulu H7. Enter. Access denied. Sweat pricked at his hairline despite the cold air. He tried again. Maybe he had transposed a digit. 3. 9 Alpha Zulu 7. He hit the enter key with more force than necessary. Access denied. System, lockdown imminent in 30 seconds. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in his chest. He was not just locked out, he was trapped. H. The hum of the servers seemed to pitch up, turning into a whine. He looked around. The blue lights on the racks turned red, row by row, H, sweeping toward him like a tide. He yanked the drive out, but the screen did not change. Lockdown imminent. 15 seconds. H. He needed to leave. Now, he turned and sprinted back the way he came. The eisel felt longer than before. The red light distorted his depth perception, making the floor look like it was moving beneath his feet. He reached the steel door. H. He grabbed the handle and pulled. Locked. Of course it was locked. The H. The magnetic seal had engaged with a thud that vibrated through the metal handle and into his bones. H. He was sealed in a refrigerator with a supercomputer that was about to scream for the guards. 10 seconds. He backed away from the door. H. His mind racing. There had to be a manual override. Fire safety regulations demanded it. He scanned the walls. Nothing. No red lever. Shh. No glass to break. This was a black site. Regulations were just suggestions here. 5 seconds. The whining noise reached a crescendo. H. Jonas covered his ears, gritting his teeth against the sonic assault. Then, the sound cut out completely. The red lights vanished. The room plunged into total darkness. Jonas stood still, his breathing loud in the sudden void. He reached for his flashlight, H. But before he could click it on, a voice spoke from the terminal behind him. It was synthetic smooth, and terrified him more than the sirens outside. Hello, Jonas. We have been waiting for you. He spun around. The monitor at the end of the eisel was the only source of light now, glowing with a pure, white intensity. It did not show code anymore. It showed a live video feed. It was a camera angle from inside his own apartment. He saw his living room. H. He saw the unwashed dishes on the counter. And he saw a figure sitting in his armchair, holding a framed photograph of his daughter. H. Jonas felt his knees go weak. The objective had changed. This was not a heist anymore. It was a hostage negotiation. H. And he had nothing to trade. Who are you? Jonas asked, his voice cracking in the dry air. H. The figure on the screen looked up at the camera. Even in the grainy footage, Jonas recognized the face. It was the contact, Ash. The man who had given him the map. The man who had sent him here to die. I am the redundancy, the man said. H. His voice calm and terrifying. And you are the loose end. Jonas realized then that the cold in the room had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It was the chill of the grave. H. He gripped the useless drive in his hand, his mind searching for an angle, a weapon, a way out. He had 3 minutes before the security team arrived to collect him. 3 minutes to save his life, and more importantly, the life of the girl in the picture. He looked at the keyboard. If the system knew he was here, maybe the system could listen. H. Let's talk, Jonas said to the screen, forcing strength into his voice. The man in the apartment smiled. I am listening, but talk fast. H. Jonas stepped back toward the terminal. The game had just begun. The stairwell door slammed open under the force of her shoulder. Elena stumbled onto the concrete landing, her breath tearing at her throat like jagged glass. Below her, the echo of heavy boots hammered a chaotic rhythm against the metal steps. They were close. Too close. She did not stop to check the time. Every second wasted was a death sentence. She vaulted the railing, dropping 10 feet to the landing below, absorbing the impact with a roll that jarred her teeth. Pain flared in her bad knee. A sharp reminder of the fall she had taken in Zurich, but she shoved it down into the dark box in her mind where she kept her fear. We have to keep moving, she told herself. The voice in her earpiece crackled to life. Elena, do you copy? It was Marcus. His voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. I am here, she gasped, scrambling to her feet and throwing her weight against the next door. I am at the 30th floor. The elevators are locked down. You need to get to the loading dock, Marcus said. The extraction team is 2 minutes out. 2 minutes. It might as well have been a lifetime. The door gave way, spilling her into the pristine white corridor of the research division. The contrast was blinding. Moments ago she had been in the dim industrial gray of the utility shaft, and now she was surrounded by glass and polished chrome. Red emergency lights strobed overhead, bathing the laboratory in a bloody pulse. A siren wailed in the distance. A low mechanical moan that vibrated in the floorboards. She sprinted past rows of empty desks. Papers scattered across the floor like dead leaves. They had evacuated the civilians first, just as protocol dictated. That meant everyone left in the building was either a hunter or prey. Elena checked the magazine of her pistol. 3 rounds left. It was not enough to fight a war, but it was enough to buy a moment of hesitation from anyone foolish enough to step in her way. Get to the North Service elevator, Marcus instructed. I have bypassed the lockdown on that specific car. It is your only way down. Elena turned the corner, her boots squeaking on the linoleum. She saw the elevator doors at the end of the hall. The light above them was green, a beacon of hope in a sea of red. She pushed her legs faster, her lungs burning. She was 50 feet away when the glass wall to her right shattered. Shards of safety glass sprayed across the hallway like diamond dust. Elena threw herself to the ground, sliding behind a heavy reception desk as bullets chewed into the plaster above her head. Pinned down, she hissed into the comms. Marcus, I have company? How many? I did not stop to count. She shouted over the noise of suppressing fire. At least 2. Automatic weapons. You have to move, Elena. The extraction window is closing. If you miss this transport, there is no plan B. She knew that. In this line of work, plan B was usually a shallow grave. She gripped her weapon, feeling the cold steel against her palm. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, visualizing the layout of the room. The elevator was 40 feet away. The shooters were positioned near the conference room, likely using the door frame for cover. She needed a distraction. Elena reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. She swiped the screen with a trembling thumb. Activating the remote override for the fire suppression system. Please work, she whispered. A second later, the ceiling hissed. A curtain of white chemical suppressant dumped into the hallway, instantly reducing visibility to 0. The gunfire stopped, replaced by confused shouting. Now, Elena surged upward. She stayed low, weaving through the thick white fog. She could not see the shooters, but she knew they could not see her either. She relied on memory, counting her steps. 10, 20, H30. A shadow loomed out of the mist to her left, a silhouette of a man raising a rifle. Elena did not hesitate. She fired 2 shots. The silhouette crumbled. She reached the elevator and slammed her hand against the call button. The doors were already open, waiting for her. She dived inside, hitting the button for the basement level. As the doors began to slide shut, a bullet sparked against the metal frame, missing her face by inches. Then the seal closed, and the world went silent. The elevator descended smoothly. Elena leaned her head against the cool metal wall, trying to slow her heart rate. She checked the drive in her pocket. The data was safe. The evidence that would bring down the entire syndicate was right there. Warm against her side. "Marcus," she said. "Go ahead, Elena. I am in the elevator. ETA to the loading dock is 60 seconds. "Good, Marcus replied. "But Elena, listen to me carefully. The situation has changed." Her stomach dropped faster than the elevator. "Changed how?" "The extraction team," Marcus paused. There was a hesitation in his voice that she had never heard before. "The extraction team has been compromised. You are walking into a trap." Elena stared at the floor indicator as the numbers ticked down. 20, 19, 18. "What are you saying?" "I am saying you cannot exit at the basement," Marcus said. "They are waiting for you." "You have to climb out." "Climb out?" Elena looked up at the emergency hatch in the ceiling of the elevator car. "We are moving at 15 feet per second. Do it, Elena. Now." She holstered her weapon and jumped, grabbing the edges of the hatch. She pushed it up and hauled herself onto the roof of the moving car. The wind in the shaft roared around her, smelling of grease and old dust. She stood on top of the car, looking up at the receding darkness of the shaft above her. "Stop the car," she commanded. "I am trying," Marcus said. "But they are overriding my controls. They are bringing you down to them." The Elena looked at the massive steel cables suspending the car. She looked at the service ladder bolted to the wall of the shaft. Blurring past as she descended, she had to make a jump for the ladder. At this speed, if she missed, the fall would kill her. If she waited, the men in the basement would kill her. It was not a choice. It was a calculation. "Tell me when the next service platform is close," she yelled over the wind. 3 seconds, Marcus shouted. 2, 1. "Jump!" Elena launched herself into the void. Her fingers clawed at the cold iron rungs. The impact shuddered through her skeleton, threatening to tear her grip loose from the ladder. She slammed her body against the wall of the shaft. The breath driven from her lungs in a sharp, agonizing wheeze. For a second, she just hung there, suspended over the dark abyss. Swaying slightly as the elevator car continued its descent below her. She watched the roof of the car shrink, the light fading until it stopped at the basement level. A moment later, muffled shouting echoed up the shaft. They were breaching the elevator doors. They would find it empty. Elena pulled herself up, wincing as her shoulder protested. A. She was alive. That was the only metric that mattered. Marcus, she whispered, pressing the comms unit against her ear. I am on the ladder. I see your signal, Marcus replied. His voice was tight. That was too close. Elena, you said the team was compromised. By whom? We do not know yet, Marcus said. Ish. But the order to ambush you came from a high-level override code. Someone at the agency sold us out. Elena stopped climbing for a beat. Shh. The agency was the only safety net she had. If they were burned, she was a ghost. She was worse than a ghost. H. She was a target with a price tag on her head. Where do I go? She asked. You need to get to the street level, Marcus instructed. H. But not through the lobby. There is a maintenance hatch on level 3 that leads to the parking structure ventilation. H. It is a tight squeeze, but it exits into the alley behind the building. Elena looked up. Level 3 was 40 feet above her. Shh. She gritted her teeth and began to climb. The metal rungs were slick with oil and condensation. Her muscles burned with lactic acid, begging her to stop, but the sounds of angry voices below were a powerful motivator. As she climbed, she thought about the data drive in her pocket. It contained names, bank accounts, and locations. It was enough to topple governments. No wonder they had sent a kill squad. No wonder her own people had turned on her. The truth was a dangerous commodity. And she was currently the sole distributor. She reached the maintenance hatch. It was a rusted square of steel secured by a simple padlock. She drew her pistol, wrapped it in her jacket to muffle the sound, and fired a single round into the lock. The metal shattered. She kicked the grate open and crawled inside. The ventilation shaft was cramped, smelling of stale air and diesel fumes. She dragged herself forward on her elbows. The concrete rough against her stomach. Marcus, I am in the vents, she said. Keep moving, Marcus said. I am scrubbing your digital footprint as we speak. I have killed the cameras in the alley. You have a window of 3 minutes before the perimeter sweep reaches that side of the building. Elena pushed herself faster. She could see a grate of light ahead. The exit. She reached the end of the tunnel and peered through the slats. The alley was empty, save for overflowing dumpsters and puddles of dirty rainwater. She kicked the grate loose and tumbled out onto the wet asphalt. The cold night air hit her face, sharp and reviving. She stood up, brushing the dust from her clothes. She was out. But she was far from safe. There is a motorcycle parked 2 blocks east, Marcus said. It is a dead drop vehicle left by an operative who retired last year. The key is taped under the rear fender. Elena started running. The city sounds of distant traffic and sirens felt overwhelming after the silence of the shaft. She kept to the shadows, avoiding the pools of yellow light cast by the street lamps. She found the bike. It was an old, battered touring model, covered in a tarp. She reached under the fender, and her fingers brushed against the cool metal of a key. She mounted the bike and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life with a satisfying growl. Where are we going? Marcus, she asked, revving the engine. Safe House 4 is burned, Marcus said. The safe house in the marina is compromised. Elena, you have nowhere to go. Elena looked at the road stretching out before her. The city was a maze of dangers, H, and she was running out of turns. Then we make a new place, she said, kicking the bike into gear. She sped off into the night, the red taillight trailing behind her like a streak of blood. She was alone, she was hunted, and she had never felt more alive. H. The wind whipped past her helmet, a constant roar that drowned out the city. She leaned into the curve, H, the tires biting into the damp asphalt. The speedometer needle climbed past 90 miles per hour. H. She wove through the late night traffic, treating sedans and trucks like stationary obstacles. Elena kept her eyes on the mirrors. No flashing lights. No black SUVs. Not yet. But they had satellites, they had traffic cameras, and they had the agency's full resources. H. It was only a matter of time before the digital net tightened around her. Marcus, she said, her voice vibrating against her throat mic. H. I am going dark? That is a bad idea, Marcus replied instantly. If you cut the link, I cannot warn you. I cannot guide you. H. If they have compromised the agency, they have compromised the comms, Elena countered. She took a sharp right, H, banking hard onto an off-ramp that led toward the industrial district. The air here tasted of sulfur and the sea. Elena, listen to me. Marcus sounded desperate. That drive has a tracker. If you do not decrypt it and disable the beacon, they will find you in 10 minutes. H. She skidded to a halt beneath the concrete arch of a suspension bridge. The shadows here were deep and heavy. She killed the engine. The silence that rushed in was sudden and ringing. A tracker? She asked, dismounting. You failed to mention that earlier. Esh. I just found out, Marcus said. The encryption is quantum. I cannot break it from here. You need a hardline connection. H. Elena pulled the drive from her pocket. It looked innocent, just a small rectangle of black metal. But it felt heavy. H, pulsing with the weight of the lives it would ruin, she looked at the motorcycle. Then at the river, churning sluggishly nearby. H. She could not go to a hard line. That would ping her location instantly. Marcus was wrong, or he was lying, or he was being played. I am not plugging this in, Elena said. Then you are a dead woman walking? Marcus snapped. She made a decision. It was reckless, but calculation had only gotten her into a trap. I am tossing the comms, Marcus. Do not try to find me. Elena, wait. H. She pulled the earpiece out and dropped it onto the concrete. She brought her heavy boot down. H. Crushing the plastic and circuitry into dust. She looked at the drive again. If there was a tracker, she had to shield it. She opened the motorcycle's toolkit and found a roll of lead tape used for balancing tires. H. She wrapped the drive until it was a shapeless gray lump. It was crude, but it would dampen the signal. She got back on the bike. H. She did not turn the lights on. She rolled it manually out of the shadows, using the slope of the road to gather speed before popping the clutch. The engine caught with a low rumble. She had no support. H. No extraction, no handler. She turned the bike toward the old shipping yards. There was one person she knew who operated outside the digital world, a relic from the Cold War who despised computers. H. If anyone could kill a quantum tracker, it was the old clockmaker on 4th Street. Elena twisted the throttle. The hunt was on, H, and she was done running. It was time to turn the tables. 4th Street was a graveyard of industry. Tch. Skeletal cranes loomed against the night sky, their rusted arms pointing toward the harbor where black water lapped against rotting pylons. H. Elena guided the motorcycle down an alley that smelled of dead fish and diesel, cutting the engine a block away from her destination. Shh. Shh. She pushed the heavy bike behind a stack of wooden pallets and covered it with a discarded tarp. Silence settled over the alley, heavy and wet. Without the voice of Marcus in her ear, the world felt dangerously large. She checked the street. Empty. The fog was rolling in off the water, thick enough to taste. She moved toward a narrow storefront wedged between two abandoned warehouses. The glass was grime-streaked, displaying a collection of pocket watches that had stopped keeping time decades ago. There was no sign, just a faded gold number painted on the door, 101. Elena did not knock. She reached up to the lintel, her fingers finding the hidden latch mechanism. She pressed it twice, then once. The lock tumbled with a heavy clunk. She slipped inside, and the sound hit her instantly. Ticking. It was a rhythmic, overwhelming pulse generated by hundreds of mechanical clocks covering every inch of the walls. Grandfather clocks, mantel clocks, cuckoo clocks. They all beat out different seconds, creating a chaotic symphony of time. The air smelled of cedar shavings and machine oil. It was a smell from her childhood, a smell that meant safety. Hello, Silas. Elena said softly. She did not look toward the back of the shop, but she heard the distinct click of a hammer being pulled back on a shotgun. You are loud, Elena. The voice was raspy. Coming from the shadows behind the counter. And you are late. I ran into traffic, she said, keeping her hands visible. An old man stepped into the light of a single hanging bulb. He wore a leather apron stained with ink and oil. The H and his eyes were magnified behind thick jeweler's lopes. He did not lower the weapon. Who is chasing you this time? Silas asked. Everyone, Elena replied. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the lead-wrapped lump. I have a drive. It has a quantum tracker. I need you to kill it without killing the data. Silas looked at the gray package, then back at her face. He lowered the shotgun slowly. Quantum trackers are nasty business, he grumbled, extending a hand that was surprisingly steady for his age. If you brought the agency to my door, girl, I will bury you in the basement myself. They do not know I am here, Elena said. I went dark. I broke my comms. Silas took the drive. He weighed it in his palm, his face twisting into a scowl. Then locked the door, he said, turning toward his workbench. We have work to do, and time is the one thing you can never steal back.